front top right, front top right facing, front top left, front top left facing, back, front waist right, back waist, front waist left, collar, front skirt right, front skirt left, front skirt facing, back skirt, sleeve. Sew up the darts on all the panels. Sew the back top to the outer back waist with a 1 cm seam allowance. Sew the back waist to the back skirt with a 1 cm seam allowance. Moving on to the front. Sew the front top right to the front waist with a 1 cm seam allowance. Then sew the front waist to the front skirt with a 1 cm seam allowance. Repeat this for the front left panels. Sew the front and back panels together along the shoulder and side seams, starting from the notches with a 1 cm seam allowance. Make sure the seams are pushed in towards the center. On the front top left panel, mark out the center front notch, then measure and mark a 1 cm sewing line. To attach the bias tape, open up the bias tape and align it to the edge of the sewing line. Sew exactly in the crease of the bias tape. Once you're done, fold over the bias tape and iron well. Repeat this step for the top part. Fold open the bias tape and align the edge to the sewing line. Then sew exactly in the crease, stopping at the center front notch. Fold the bias tape over and iron well. Front right, back, front left. Sew the inner waist panels together with a 1 cm seam allowance. Match both front waist right panels together, aligning up the centers. And sew with a 1 cm seam allowance. Mark out the center front notch on the front top facing. Starting exactly from the center front notch, sew the front top facing and front skirt facing with a 1 cm seam allowance. Check that the seam allowances are both flipped inwards. Repeat this for the other side. Match both front waist left panels together and sew with a 1 cm seam allowance. Mark out the center front notch on the front top left facing. Starting exactly from the center front notch, sew down the front top facing and skirt facing with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Grab a pair of scissors and snip exactly down the center front and seam allowances to reduce the tension. Repeat this for the other side, making sure to snip exactly down the center front. At the skirt hem, with the facings folded, sew 4 centimeters from the bottom. On the wearer's right, understitch on the facings, making sure to catch onto the seam allowances below. Repeat on the wearer's left. Understitch on the facings, making sure to catch onto the seam allowances below. At the skirt hem, snip into the seam allowances to reduce the bulk. Turn it inside out. Fold up the skirt hem by 4 centimeters and iron well. Then top stitch 3 centimeters from the folded edge. To sew down the inner waist panels, ensure that the side seams are lined up. Then sew from the right side in the ditch, making sure to catch onto the waist panel below. Sew the sleeve panels together at the sides with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Repeat for all other sleeve panels. With right sides together, sew the main and lining panels along the hem with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Grab a pair of scissors and reduce the seam allowances by half. Turn it inside out. Push out and iron the edges properly so that the fabric does not peek over to the other side. Then top stitch along the sleeve hem. At the top, baste both main and lining panels together with a 0.5 cm seam allowance. Place the sleeve correctly with the shoulder seams and side seams pointing in the right direction. Sew the sleeve to the armhole with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. With the collar wrong sides together, baste along the top with a 0.3 cm seam allowance. Prepare the bias tape by folding it into half and ironing well. Slot the collar in between the folded edge and top stitch along the edge of the bias tape. Check at the center front notch of the front top left, there is a sharp 90-degree angle. Repeat for the front top right. Starting from the center front, sew the collar to the neckline with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Make sure the shoulder notch and shoulder seam lines up. Match the facing to the neckline and sew with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Repeat for the other side. Match the facing to the neckline and sew with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Snip into the seam allowances to reduce tension. Following the shoulder seam all the way down to the sleeve, flip up the edge of the sleeve by 2.5 cm and top stitch into place. Hand sew a few snap buttons to hold the front panel in place. Then add some frog buttons for decoration. And there you have it. Your dress is completed.